Before sunrise in Baltimore, the start of a long day for Reverend Robert Turner.
Motivated, anxious.
Turner walking 43 miles from his church to the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture on the National Mall.
Bless this nation to not be afraid of our own history.
The 14-hour journey in protest of what he says is the erasing of important history. The context? Decades-old artifacts related to slavery and civil rights are rotating out of exhibits at the museum as a potential White House review looms large. In late March, President Trump signed an executive order demanding, in part, the museum take down any exhibits that, quote, divide Americans based on race. But now the White House says that it's washing its hands of any involvement in changes at the museum.
If you don't know the horrors and literally the hell that we went through and the harm we went through, you may not see a need for a parent.
And Democrats in Congress sounding the alarm, signing a letter and introducing legislation to protect civil rights landmarks. NBC News went inside the museum and found at least 32 artifacts currently removed, including Harriet Tubman's Book of Hymns. Gospels believed to have been sung as she led enslaved people to freedom through the Underground Railroad. And the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, the memoir of one of the most important leaders in the abolitionist movement. Both items gifted to the Smithsonian. The institution pushing back on critics, saying on their website, quote, claims that objects have been removed for reasons other than adherence to standard loan agreements or museum practices are false. It also lists 11 new artifacts coming on display later this month. The museum reiterating in an email to NBC News that rotating objects is normal. But Liz Brazelton, the owner of a diary connected to the Oscar-winning film 12 Years a Slave, isn't convinced. She's the great-great-granddaughter of the lawyer who helped free Solomon Northam, a free black man who was kidnapped and forced into slavery.
I grew up with the diaries. My mother had the diaries. The most important thing in his diaries was the fact that he did help free this man who was a free man of color.
She gave one of his diaries to the museum in September 2015 on a 10-year loan. But before the end of the term, the museum sent her a letter in March saying, quote, we have decided to move ahead with the return a bit early to coincide with our internal gallery rotation schedule. The letter, sent 2 weeks before President Trump signed the executive order targeting the Smithsonian, raising a red flag for Brazelton.
When I saw the executive order, I wondered if they maybe knew something was going to happen and they rotated it out early because it was about slavery, that entire exhibit.
The Smithsonian declined NBC's request for an interview, but repeated in an email it was a scheduled rotation and was done to, quote, allow for necessary rest following an extended display period. Were you ever told between 2016 and 2025 that your family's lecture was ever taken off of exhibit or rotated out?
No, as far as I know, it stayed in the exhibit until recently.
Prominent pastor and civil rights leader Reverend Amos C. Brown lent 2 of his books to the museum when it opened in 2016, including a Bible he carried during protests with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. How were you feeling when the museum opened up?
I was feeling that through this museum, America will see me, will see Black people.
But earlier this year, the Smithsonian sent him an email saying they would return his books. The museum called it a standard practice, adding the loan expired in May. Brown calls it an excuse, telling us the museum always chose to renew until now.
I feel it to be very much inhumane, disrespectful, and downright unjust.
After his public pushback, the museum offered to keep the books permanently, according to a letter reviewed by NBC News. The broader controversy becoming increasingly political. House Democrats are demanding the vice president, who sits on the museum board, not to overhaul it. In a letter saying this flagrant attempt to erase Black history is unacceptable and must be stopped.
To tell the truth means to share both the good and the bad. And if we don't tell our stories, who will tell our stories?
We reached out to the White House for comment. An official tells us, quote, the White House had no involvement in removing any exhibit from the National Museum of African American History and Culture or any other Smithsonian institution. They did this on their own accord. Reverend Turner still walking to shine a brighter spotlight on the museum's artifacts getting pulled from displays.
That story cannot die. I don't care who's in the White House.
Raising the question of whether and how much Black history should be rotating with the country's politics. Yami Shalsendor, NBC News.
That is a wrap for us at this hour. You can watch Hallie, by the way, on Sunday on NBC Nightly News, back here on Monday on NBC News Now. And oh, by the way, the coverage resumes right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.